Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Stellium Astrology podcast. I'm Stephanie James, your host, and today I have the wonderful Frank Clifford from the London School of Astrology, international astrologer to the stars, um, an author with I don't even know how many books in your repertoire now. So many.
Well, I've lost count, to be honest, but I always say about 12, but it might not be. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So, how have you been, Frank? What have you been up to?
Oh, I've been busy. I've moved house. You can see I've moved in my astrology books behind
Mm,
me.
mm.
There's still a lot to move in, but yes, it's good to keep busy, particularly in times like these when there's a lot of planetary change. People are anxious about things. It's often good to obviously embrace what's coming in, but also to know what you can hold on to as well. The people you can rely on, the situations in life that are in some ways um, sort of spinal columns, that they're anchors in your life as well. It's always good to know uh, what it is you'd run to, or at least what you'd run out of the house with if there was a fire.
Do you
That's
know, I'm going to have to say that being maybe it's my Mars Pluto trine or my Scorpio moon, but as a child, could even be my Saturn Pluto conjunction. As a child, I actually had a fire bag in my house, which was full of like sentimental objects that I was like, if there was a fire, that's the bag I'd grab. As a child, very small. Isn't that odd?
Wow. Well, I guess it's do you still have something like that, or you have you
Not anymore, I don't think. No, I have, but you just reminded me of it. I had it for years actually, and I kept all sorts of random things in it that I thought were really important that I didn't want to lose, like sentimental stuff. But it was in a body shop bag, which, if you think about my Saturn, Pluto, square Venus, Mercury, that seems quite fitting.
well, you,
um,
you were doing something for the environment as well.
yeah, exactly. The little activist in me. But
Recycling.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on this month that's going to impact us for, at the very least, the next couple of years. But actually, it's like a kind of an echo forward, a drop in the pond that's going to ripple out over the next 20 years. I'm talking about Pluto in Aquarius. And though there are always two ways to look at something, I think a lot of people are quite concerned about, and maybe it's because of the way that things are at the moment in the world. There's a lot of worry about financial situations and political leadership and that kind of thing. So people are concerned, and on a personal level as well, the fear of an impending Pluto transit maybe. So I'm hearing some people say, I'm worried about what this could mean for me. And it can be hard to look on the bright side when there's so much negative stuff online. And I get suckered into that too. I read something the other day that was quite doom and gloom about Pluto and Aquarius, and I actually came away from it feeling really anxious. And even I, as a bright, positive person, can feel that way. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, quite a few thoughts on that. First of all, I think whenever I read something scary, negative, I remember that free content online is often content free.
Mm-hmm.
And I worry about people sucking that in, or at least allowing that to permeate their minds or their bodies or their hearts. And for me, when I read that, it tells me more about the writer and what they may be anxious about. So I sort of leave that behind and think, okay, that's what the person is anxious about, or at least that's what they're conjuring up for whatever reason. And that's not my stuff. That doesn't belong to me. And we've all, if the thing to remember with any of these ingresses into new signs, any of these transits, any upcoming transits somebody may have mentioned, is that we've already been through a huge amount of transits in our lifetime, whether we're 18, whether we're 48, whether we're in our 80s or 88, like my mother is. And so if you look back and see those transits, you're still here, you've survived. And I think that's important to remember and not to get caught up in this it's sort of, I guess it reminds me a little bit of what we've just been through with lockdown, that people get um, they get egged on or in a lather about about possibilities, not always facts and the reality. And so to me, Pluto is Pluto moving into Aquarius is a new dawn, a new age, but it's an invitation. And it's an invitation for people to behave well or to behave badly. And each one of us has a commitment to ourselves to make the most of our lives. And so when Pluto moves into Aquarius, the commitment surely, or the invitation must be to do the very best with it that you can, to try and understand what it's asking of you. That's the first thing. And then to navigate it in a way that feels authentic, not to be wrapped up in everybody else's anxieties or what it might be or what's happening to somebody else. We've got to remember that transits don't do anything to us. They're like saddle points in the life, or they're like little markers in a YouTube video. You know, they have that. They're turning points. They're chapters, and how we decide to read that chapter or to live it is an individual thing. So it's an important thing to remember. It's an invitation to participate rather than feeling condemned to be in some sort of global problem.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, as well, how Pluto is a planet that represents power, and people almost see Pluto moving into Aquarius as a point where they feel powerless. I mean, we are powerless because, you know, we can't control certain things, and Pluto kind of indicates that that could be a potential that we have to learn to adapt rather than change something. But instead of thinking this is a time of empowerment, people are thinking this is a time of powerlessness.
It will be if you think that way.
Yeah.
I think that's the script we write. And yes, Pluto is it's a combination. I think, as you know it, Pluto reminds you of the things in life that you can't control. We can't extend life indefinitely. We have to pay our taxes, even if we try to avoid them or whatever. You know, there are certain realities in life that Pluto reminds us of, and things that are non-negotiable in a way, that people do act in ways that have negative impact. People choose to make decisions in their lives that impact the people around them. You just have to watch any sort of 48 Hours or crime documentary to realize one person's action ripples out and affects everybody around you. And often that can feel like a Pluto transit in a way. Something else has happened that then has repercussions with you. Hopefully not a crime documentary on your family, but it's one of those things, isn't it, that Pluto reminds you that certain things in life, awful tragedies, terrorism, different things that happen that impact us, illness and decisions people make. There are things that we cannot control, but we can control our response to them. And that's where the power comes with Pluto.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of you know, those places where like an atomic bomb's gone off, and you know, you revisit like 30 years later and there's just beautiful like foliage growing everywhere. And you know, there was I can't even remember what the name of the program was, but there was even, you know, moss and grass growing through brickwork and pushing the bricks apart, where nature prevails. And actually Pluto doesn't, even though you'd think of it as a completely destructive force, it actually creates space for something new and beautiful. And you know, even those wastelands that you know, nobody's allowed to go into for 30 odd years post atomic, you know, explosion, actually they have a chance to become something beautiful and untouched and really back to basics. But maybe even it will be even better next time round. So I just always makes me think of that whenever you sort of talk about that kind of thing with Pluto.
Yes, and Pluto is really what happens after there's been a demolition, a change, a monumental transformation. It's how do we grow? How do we rebuild? And it doesn't mean that it comes in a totally destructive way, but Pluto has a way of bringing situations to the fore where we need to either kill it off, move on, transform, shed our skin The Pluto transformation is so clear when you see, you see the caterpillar become the butterfly, that
Yeah.
transformation. And yes,
Mm.
there will always be life after Pluto.
Yeah.
That sounds like a heading of something, doesn't it? Because that's what it's about. Saturn is
Mm.
often about finality. It's often about that sense of endings, closing the door. But Pluto is that idea of where do we go next? What do we do once a structure has transformed? And
Mm.
that's where the power is, to realize that there is always uh, uh, life after death. In that sense, there's always rebirth after a situation has ended.
And we're kind of in this like post-COVID hangover where we had the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020, which obviously was, with a bit of Jupiter involved, ended up being a global event that everybody was affected by. And we are having, I suppose, a collective PTSD experience. Whether or not you were really affected by COVID in a way that was you would consider negative or positive in your life, we all were impacted in some way or another. And perhaps this is all part of our collective PTSD, the anticipation of what on earth is going to be next now that Pluto's shifting into Aquarius. I mean, it's a funny time because with Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn and during the pandemic, where I really felt like time got warped. Most people I spoke to for those years, we've got literally, it's like we had no concept of time. And some people were like, I can't even remember if that was last Christmas or this Christmas, and how on earth has it been this amount of time? And I really feel like those planets getting together warped our perception in such a huge way. And maybe we're kind of at the final degrees with Pluto, at the final degrees of Capricorn, we're finally getting ourselves back into a sense of rhythm with reality, which has been changed completely. And now it's moving into an air sign, which is a whole different type of Pluto expression. And by the way, it's happening. Is it next week? It's happening. It's on the
Now you
the
ask.
20th. It's the 23rd, isn't it? That it's happening. I've got my notes here somewhere.
Yes,
Um,
23rd. Yes, or if you're in
yes.
Australia, it's the 24th. You get an
Oh, there
extra
you
day.
go. Wow. Treasure that.
But the key to remember, of course, is it will pop back into Capricorn to finish off that work
Yes.
before it fully moves into Aquarius. So it's not as though the shift takes place immediately. And
Yes.
it's always great to observe. And I write this in my books about the 29th, that 29 degrees, that 30th degree in the chart. Always good to watch what's happening when a planet reaches that final degree, and just read the
Mm,
newspapers fully, because it will
mm,
give you an idea of what the last 15 years have been about. But also when it moves into 0 degrees Aquarius, as it does next week, just watch and read everything you can about it. For me, that 29 degrees really came up last week. For those of you in England watching, the WhatsApp messages to do with Matt Hancock, and
right,
how
yeah.
that exposed so
Yeah.
much of the government interaction, or maybe
Yeah.
failure to act, however you want to see it. But it's a real blowing off the lid off the structure of what we've lived through as well. So, and it's a real on one side it feels like a betrayal because
Mm,
of what was released and how it was released, and the other it feels like a true Pluto expose as well. So I would say look at the news at when a planet's at 29 and look at it when it's 0. You'll get a real sense of how the times are shifting. And with
yeah.
Pluto, we've got a good year and a half really to digest so much of this and to watch it take place. I got to tell you something. I had an email. Uh,
Yeah.
Somebody asked. I wrote an essay in a book called Horoscope Snapshots. Uh, I don't know, 2014, I think it was. Feels like a long time. It is a long time ago. And I talk about the uh, Pluto and the history of America, and the Pluto return that just
Yeah.
happened, still in process, etc.
Mm,
And somebody saw it somewhere and asked me to send them. So I sent them the chapter from the book. I should have said by the book, but anyway, I sent them the chapter. And it talks about January 2020 and the deconstruction, and I called it economic frostbite, because there was a real sense of that beginning a time of economic hardship. And he wrote back and said, "Oh, I can't believe it." And I became his new guru for a moment. And he wanted to know, he said, is Pluto in Aquarius going to be World War III? Are we going to find a new hero? And I read these things and I thought, oh my goodness, what have I started? Because none of those questions are things that are really, I guess, things that we should be asking in a way. So what if I predicted World War III? How would that help anybody? It would just make people anxious and worried about it. And his final thing is, they're going to be a hero to save us. And I thought, this is interesting because Pluto moves into Aquarius, and Aquarius is really the sign of the anti-hero. They don't really like to admire celebrities. There's that feeling of, I don't really want to be part of the herd that stands outside waiting for autographs of a celebrity, or follows people on Instagram. There can be resistance to it. But the shadow side, of course, and when a planet like Pluto moves into a new sign, it not only speaks to that new sign, it speaks to the sign opposite. So when Pluto moves into Aquarius, it's also talking about Leo. So in a way, it's almost like power to the people and death of the obsession with celebrity, although I don't think that will end. But there's a sense of, actually, we are the heroes. We're not waiting for somebody. Think about what people invested in Obama all those years ago to save America, or Trump to save America. We can't expect one person to do any of that. We have to do it individually, step by step, door by door, house by house. And I think that's part of the process of Pluto moving into Aquarius, is that the power is with the people. Do not expect the leaders, the Leo, the monarchs, etc., to have a true way forward. We've got to find the answer and make it happen individually, in communities, etc. I think that's where the message is. So maybe it is the death of the hero worshipping era to some extent, or maybe it should be.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing else, Pluto in Capricorn has revealed how human some of the sort of leading figures are, like the royal family and the ridiculous kind of theatre that's been for a while, and the political shambles that have been going on, the Tory party in the United Kingdom and their parties during lockdown, to the point that we had how many prime ministers in 1 month at one point, new prime ministers, it's just got to the point where it's so obvious that the way things have been for a long time, you realize how fallible everybody is, and that even people appointed by God, the royal family supposedly appointed by God himself, only answer to God himself, are also human beings who have affairs and go on Oprah and talk about all these kind of systemic problems, essentially, that arise through people who have positions of privilege, and all of that sort of thing. And I feel like maybe I am the only person who's really excited about Pluto and Aquarius, but I am in my very core a complete rebel. And I might not seem it because I am a Capricorn, but I have a lot of Aquarius stuff and a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. And I think Chris said, I've never met anybody so rebellious. Like, it drives him mad, because he's not like that. He's got a Capricorn stellium. So like, we're kind of opposites. But I don't do it on purpose. But this idea of Pluto moving into Aquarius, I'm like, there's going to be great change. It's going to be so positive. Everybody's going to be, I feel like I'm hoping for more equality, and one of the things, I think, two headlines for me, we're saying about looking at headlines, two of the things that really fired me up actually recently. One of them was Rishi Sunak, the British Prime Minister, talking about removal of human rights legislation for people immigrating to the UK, and saying, if you have, I think it's Article 8, because I used to work in immigration. If you come over and you have a family here, even if that happens, it doesn't mean that you can be granted leave to remain, which is horrible. A horrible aspect of working in immigration is separating families. And so that really made me angry. And I thought that sounds very much like Pluto and Aquarius to me. There's something very unfair and unhumanitarian about that. And the other thing that really, one of the headlines that really interested me was that Gary Lineker, the presenter of Match of the Day in the UK, spoke out about that and gave his personal opinion on his personal Twitter channel. And then he got asked to step back from his position of presenting Match of the Day, which has been kind of a British institution as far as sporting fans are concerned. And his co-hosts decided in solidarity that they would step down too, because they wanted to stand with him and say, no, he should be able to say what he actually wants, and it's okay to have an opinion. And it stoked this huge debate about whether or not somebody in a position of great influence should have an opinion about something political. And then this hypocrisy came out about how the BBC would support certain political campaigns and, all of this. And to me, it just felt like a kind of ending of the kind of the plutocracy censorship, and then stepping into this kind of Aquarian, people should be able to speak and say what they think. Everybody should be able to have an opinion. And I don't know, it just kind of, that really fired me up about that. But it just feels like it's that dance in the final minutes of Capricorn. It's almost like it's blurring into Aquarius already. I already feel it, don't you?
Yes, I think it needs to get bad. It needs to get so difficult that we do something about it.
Yes.
It's, my dad used to say, my dad was a real rebel, very much a union man, very much for the people. And he used to say that if there was any sort of dissent, the politicians would say, let's take a halfpenny or 5 pence, whatever, off the price of beer to appease the masses. And my dad was a great believer in how politics and religion did that, to keep people comfortable enough to endure the difficult things. So you just make it easy, make it easier for them. And I don't get disappointed in the politicians because I've never believed in them. I've never felt, I've never elevated them to think that they have the answers. No. And so if we try to hero worship anybody, when I read about the Matt Hancock texts and the WhatsApp messages and all of that, I thought, well, in a way, what do you expect? Do you really, are you surprised that people are treating others with contempt? They give you enough reason to believe that instead of believe in them. So it's not that I'm cynical, it's just that I don't invest a lot of energy believing that somebody is going to have the answer or save me. I do a lot of watching on YouTube of different political discussions, people that are interesting, whether it's Piers Morgan or Matt Walsh or Jordan Peterson and a lot of different people, find them fascinating because I think the dialogue needs to stay open. And even if I don't agree with things, and I think, okay, Piers, you're moaning about Meghan Markle creating a drama, and yet that is your central drama, to create the drama about her.
It was so funny watching him go on about that. It was just hilarious, and it was he was having a moon wobble or something. It was like the nodes lined up with something in his chart, maybe his Mars, and that was when he lost his job. And it was just like, everyone was saying, oh, just because she didn't go on a second date with you, or do you know what I mean? I just thought, oh my goodness, Piers, please be quiet.
I really enjoy listening to him because I don't agree with certain things he says. He does speak a lot of common sense at times as well, but I find it fascinating. I watched something with Matt Walsh, who did the documentary What is a Woman, and I just totally found myself disagreeing with quite a bit of what he said. And then part of it, I think, yes, you are keeping the debate open. Instead of canceling somebody, have a discussion. Where can you go with it? And I think maybe the Pluto and Aquarius, I hope, is bringing the end to that automatic cancel culture. Now, Harvey Weinstein, it's when you, or Bill Cosby, you get 70, 80 people turn up and say, this is what happened to me. That's common sense evidence usually. And but the idea of canceling somebody before things have been proven, before they've gone through what we all hope
Yeah.
we would be, that we would go through. I had a student
Yeah.
a few years ago who was saying to me, we should name and shame all these people, etc. And I said, well, what if it were your husband? Wouldn't you
Yeah.
want him to have the privacy to be able to clear his name, to be able to get to the bottom of it? We saw all of this with the repercussions of the Jimmy Savile case, as you
Yeah.
know, that a lot of, they were investigating a lot of people, dirtied their names without any
Yeah.
evidence. And that bothers me a lot, because we could
Yeah.
all, we watch it, but we could all know somebody who gets bothered by that and their life is destroyed by that. And
Yeah.
yet that's all we remember. We don't remember the apology or the, oh, there's no evidence, etc. So I'm a big fan of saying, keep the debate going, don't cancel somebody. And whatever goes on, you know, go follow the debate, look at what's going on, keep the dialogue open, and the idea of just banning somebody immediately, well, I just hope no one who is up for that goes through that situation, because
Yeah.
it must be extremely, it's the worst of Pluto. That idea
Yeah.
of it being non-negotiable, you're gone, you're dead, you've got no voice anymore.
Well, straight into room 101.
Yes, indeed, indeed, that's the Pluto journey
Yeah.
at the moment, and it feels very punishing, very Capricorn in that sense of you've disobeyed. And I hope, you know, the Aquarian shadow can be equally the only right way of doing something, but I do hope it will allow us to have to keep the flow of dialogue open. And yeah, I just find myself, I was watching a documentary on Bill Cosby the other day as well. There was a 3-4 part documentary on the BBC about him, something like We Need to Talk About Cosby, it was called. Fascinating, fascinating. But people were watching old clips of him in the Cosby Show, joking and laughing and going, oh, that's creepy. Well, it wasn't creepy then,
Yeah.
you know. In
No.
hindsight, everything can be given a
Yeah.
but yes, I would like to feel that Pluto and Aquarius keeps the dialogue open enough for us to learn from each other with very different opinions, so we can keep living together without canceling each other just because we
Yeah.
agree with each other.
I think that it's a real skill, maybe, I don't know, to be able to take in lots of different information from people that you like and don't like, and listen to it with a sense of impartiality, without getting triggered. I mean, it can still trigger you, but you can still appreciate what people are trying to say. I'm very similar to you, but I think we've got some similar stuff in our charts, haven't we? And we are, I think we kind of like to collect people's ideas, don't we? And have a listen and sort of, you know, decide what feels right to us rather than being told. And I agree with you. I'm very similar in that respect when it comes to collecting and assessing information. And I think there's somebody who has really made great strides in the cancel culture, freedom of speech arena is quite possibly Elon Musk, who has just acquired Twitter a few months back. And during that period, he's, you know, removing censorship, letting people come back onto the platform that have previously been banned under the previous rules. I mean, it's kind of like Twitter's broken away from the kind of like the Google sort of umbrella, I think, hasn't it? And it's now more independently owned in a sense, really. And so what Elon decides will happen will be allowed on there. So there's definitely a shift in that respect. And I always thought that that was like a bit of a foreshadow for Pluto and Aquarius. Whether you like Elon Musk or not, it's about the symbol of you know, what he's done, that action he's taken in order to change a whole platform that's all about sharing your opinions, so that you don't have to feel so restricted. So I find that interesting. And also what's interesting is that Saturn's moved through Capricorn and Aquarius over the past 5 years and has now moved into Pisces, which means for the first time in about 5 years he's not been in a Saturn ruled sign, because obviously Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn. So there's definitely a huge change or a huge shift in the feeling of Saturn and where he is. But he's obviously at the moment, well, will be still in charge in a sense of Pluto, because he's still kind of the boss of those two signs. He's like, you know, his expression's going to be different now because it's in Pisces. So do you think that that's going to have an impact on, I mean, I think it will, but do you think that there's going to be a more compassionate edge to Pluto as he moves through Aquarius because of Saturn's placement in Pisces?
I hope so. I hope so.
Hmm.
We can only hope, which isn't probably the strongest energy, but you know,
Hope is powerful.
yeah, yes, hope is powerful, but with intention.
Yes.
That helps, I
Yeah.
think. Uh,
Yeah.
so Saturn in Pisces, I Saturn says wake up in a way, get real, and Pisces says keep dreaming.
Hmm.
So the energy is very, very different. And I think it's in some ways a weakening of the structures of the authorities set in place in the last 5 years, on whatever side of the fence you may be. There's a weakening of that. And I think
Mm.
that is going to be interesting. I'm sort of waiting for a few years when Saturn and Neptune move into Aries and that we're redefining the individual.
I'm anticipating that as well.
Yes, yes. But, you know, I'm excited about any upcoming transit.
Yeah.
I'm not hoping or thinking something might be wonderful or not. I'm just interested to observe and to
Yes.
think on a personal level, what does this mean for me? And on another level, what does it mean for the people that come and see me or my students or friends and family? How can I help them navigate that in a way? So what
Mm.
I've said in recent weeks, I started to sit down and have a think about Saturn in Pisces. Yes, I hope there's compassionate grounds. That's a good combination of words, you know, because the
Mm.
grounding of Saturn is important. But um, if you try, I think with Saturn in Pisces, if you try to create something rigid or reliable and absolutely fault proof um, uh, in some way in your life, it may fail. Not
Mm.
necessarily, but if you try to, it's a bit like creating a boat that will have absolutely no leaks in it. Now, that may be possible, or it may be an impossibility. But Saturn in Pisces says, trying to say, okay, I'm going to have exercise absolutely every day. I'm going to cut out sugar. I'm going to do all of those things. You'll want to escape it. You'll lie to
Yeah.
yourself. You'll kid to yourself. Saturn in Pisces doesn't work in that way. What you have to do is actually search for what you believe in, what you love, what's exciting, what's meaningful for you, what's creative for you, and then create a mini structure around that. Yeah. So it's almost like saying, I really want to get back to dancing or painting or
Mm.
learning astrology or whatever it may be. And I'm going to now, that's the core. I've discovered, I've or rediscovered that key. And now I'm going to structure my life where Wednesday afternoons, possibly with some flexibility, will be my painting day. Or Thursday evenings will be my one of 2 days of astrology, whatever it may be. So I would say
Mm.
start from the inside out. Don't try and say, like a New Year's resolution, I'm giving this up, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Instead, find what you love to do, whether it's creative, spiritual, rhythmic, imaginative in any way, and lose yourself in the creative time. And as I as I as I wrote, I think a few weeks ago, um, enjoy the process of not working for results, but just the process of being and
Yeah.
living and creating in that moment. And that's how you actually will achieve your result. Not
Mm.
about worrying, I've got a deadline, I've got this to finish, but instead just saying, this is what I love to do. And before you know it, you would have created something. There would be a result of that in some way. So I think
Mm.
that's how you have to navigate, or at least from my opinion, how you might want to try to navigate Saturn in Pisces. Forget about the discipline of it and go into a creative vein and allow that to help you build some flexible structure.
That is good advice, and it really spoke to me, actually. And one of the things you were talking about was like, instead of overwhelming yourself with the amount of discipline you might need to achieve this big dream you have, rather than just focusing on little details, kind of made me think back to what you were saying about Aquarius being the opposite of Leo, whereas Pisces is the opposite of Virgo. So there's a sense of, don't be fully Saturnian and anchoring yourself in Pisces and overwhelming yourself and confusing yourself with everything. Remember, the opposite sign of Pisces is Virgo, and you can just break things down a little bit and just do little nibbles at a time, little bite-sized chunks. You don't have to just, throw the baby out with the bathwater, for a very sort of Piscean turn of phrase there. So it's definitely interesting times as far as all these major transits are concerned. Is there anything else, any insight you'd like to offer before we start exploring what you're up to?
Oh, well, just that Saturn is about duty and responsibility. Pisces is about service. But service doesn't mean servitude. It doesn't mean being a slave. Yeah. So in a way, boundaries are going to be important over the next 3 years. Saturn pops into Aries, and then it's about 3 years actually before it leaves Pisces for the time being. And I would say, find something that you want to be of service to. It might be simply half a day at a food bank, or looking after people that don't have a voice, or just being there, or typing up letters for somebody. Whatever it is you can do, think about how you can be of service, but don't lose yourself in the process. Yeah, don't be overwhelmed. Don't take on too much where all of a sudden you're running the business, you're doing the accounts, you're doing the admin, you're doing all of that. No, just find something that feels meaningful and commit to that. Be of service in some way. Give your energy freely to people, but have boundaries so you don't end up being martyred to it.
Yeah.
Or sacrificing yourself for the greater good. Because Saturn, Pisces, you've got the idea of the sacrificial goat, in a way, that sense of it being martyred or victimized. So it's important not to get into that, but to still find something that is truly helpful and meaningful to you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm speaking to so many people at the moment, and every single time they're talking, I'm just hearing the need for boundaries. It's obviously, it's very personal if you're somebody who's got, any Saturn ruled areas of the chart that are quite heavily populated with personal planets and angles and things like that. But actually, it's affecting us all, isn't it? Because it's a social planet. So it's something that we're all going to have to work on in some way or another in our lives.
Yeah, it is, being a social planet like Jupiter and Saturn both are. They really are the intermediaries between the inner planets, that's our daily life, our daily choices, our relationship, one-to-one stuff, and the outer planets, which govern the era that we live in, the zeitgeist, the energy of our generation, etc., or the current generation. So navigating Jupiter and Saturn is very useful, because we become part of something bigger than ourselves, and yet we still we still have some autonomy, or remain in some sort of control with those two planets.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your insight. As always, very fascinating and well researched and thought out. I know you've got some stuff going on at the moment, some interesting things, books, and you've always got something going on that's interesting at the LSA as well. So please share with the viewers and listeners what you've got going on, because they might want to join you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, they can always join up and get a free account at londonschoolofastrology.com, and simply, we've got a lot of free videos, free articles, lots of different things that you can just dip into without buying anything or feeling you have to buy anything. But I've been running a series on Saturday afternoons called Astro Detective, where I start to look at areas of astrology that we look at in the main course, but the Astro Detective gives me a time to do it in a little bit more detail. So we've looked at retrograde planets, we've looked at the progressed not the progressed moon, but the lunar cycle in the natal chart, etc., and lots more. Chart ruler, the ascendant ruler. So for more sort of year one students, for example, to come in and to expand on that. And we've got tarot, of course, that we do as well. And we're getting back to teaching in London as well as online in the coming months as well. So there's news about that. And speaking of fundraisers, etc., I'm always doing some sort of fundraiser. We just raised about, I think it was about £800 for a local charity up in the north of England for International Women's Day. So I'm always got my thinking cap on to think about how we can use the popularity of the school and what people invest in terms of buying courses for good causes. So the latest one was for young women, helping them, and so that was something that Kim Farley, one of my tutors, one of the long-standing LSA tutors, recommended. So we're doing that. I had a book out late last year that's still around, of course, on the wonderful inspirational TV series and film Fame, which was my generation. You're probably a little bit too young for that.
I used to watch Fame, but it was it might have been reruns. I still
Probably
enjoyed it, and I loved the theme tune. I had it on cassette.
Oh yes, yeah. Well, I've just got rid of a lot of my cassettes, sadly,
Oh,
because
really?
yes, and even the local shops didn't want my cassettes. They said CDs only. Okay.
You must, I'm sure there must be some kind of value on the vintage market somewhere. I don't know.
Maybe, I don't know. I just recycled them, but
Yeah,
somebody
it's
might
so
find them.
sad, isn't it? Yeah.
But the book is a fundraiser for a children's hospice called Clare House in Liverpool, and already raised £5,000 for them, which is
Wow, that's
really,
brilliant.
really wonderful. And the book is called Gonna Live Forever, which is the
Oh,
song Fame.
you're
And
making me feel a bit emotional. That's a lovely cause.
oh yes, I mean the people who've been organizing the Fame reunions in the last few years have been raising for that. And I thought, how can I
Oh,
help?
wow.
I could turn up and just support it. And I thought, no, I could write a book. That's what I do.
Why
So I wrote a
not?
book, and I got a lot of the cast involved. They
Wow.
gave me interviews. I did a mammoth amount of research, and I made this book that's full color and lots of insights into the film and the series. And yeah, I'm just hoping it will catch on. I'm trying to get different people to promote it and look at it, because it's for such a great cause, and it's just a very positive, uplifting series. And I tried to make the book as positive and uplifting. And I had a lovely email from one of the cast yesterday who'd finally read it and said, "Oh my God, it just made me cry all the way through."
Wow.
So it's nice to be able to do that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And you know, you've done lots of other fundraisers as well. I was published. I had an article published, didn't I, in the Book of Music Horoscopes. That was another fundraiser.
Right.
So you're always doing something. I forgot to mention in your introduction that you're a philanthropist, basically. We'll have to add that on. But yeah, so you know, you've always got something going on, and many books that I've recommended on the podcast over the years. So thank you so much for coming on today. Anybody watching, anybody who's new to the channel, there is a prize draw that happens at the end of the year every year. All you have to do is subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you have a private channel, just email me a screenshot of your subscription to Stephanie@stelliumastrology.com. That's STEFANIE at stelliumastrology.com, and I will enter you into a prize draw at the end of the year for an astrology clock, a personalized birth chart astrology clock by Catherine Monks of Monks Astrology. You've seen her work, haven't you, Frank? It's beautiful, isn't it?
Beautiful. Oh, that's a lovely gift. Wonderful.
Yes, yeah. So she's in essence sponsoring the channel this year, and I'm looking forward to pulling the name out of the hat for that prize winner. And my patrons get extra entries, so don't forget to check out the Patreon page. Anyway, thank you so much, Frank, for joining us today. I know you're a very busy man and you've got lots of unpacking to do still, but much appreciated and always lovely to talk to you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good luck with everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
See you soon.